Subject tonight that really and truly our world is really afraid to talk about, but we're going to look at it from God's viewpoint and what God says about it, so that we can then be able to have the ability to go out and tell other people and help other people understand what's going on and how to be able to handle themselves. Remember, you can't make somebody else do what is right. You can only make yourself do what is right. And so our subject tonight is racism. Let's take a look and start back in Genesis 3 and verse 20. Let me tell you, I think that most of the problems that we have in the world is because we do not understand the first few chapters of Genesis. And we don't even talk about them often. But you notice this morning as we were talking about farming, we went back into Genesis. And here we're talking about racism, we're going back into Genesis. So let's take a look at what it says here in chapter 3 and verse 20. Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all living. As you know, God had created Adam, and then, of course, after he made Adam, he made him of the dust. You ever wondered why he made him of the dust? And it's because he was supposed to return to the dust. In other words, he was from the earth and back to the earth, and because of that, all the things that are within your body and the chemically and so on would be a natural thing to be able to find in the earth. And then God created Eve from Adam's rib. Now this is kind of interesting because when he took Adam's rib, there were several things that happened that were able to see. One was he made it where the people could be compatible to exchange things like their kidneys and their corneas and all these kind of things, because they're all of the same. They all function together. By him making Adam and then making Eve from Adam, the two will go together, and whatever they produce are going to be able to be compatible with them. I'm talking about physically compatible. Doesn't mean you'll like them, but they'll be able to function. And it wasn't until man started studying the scriptures that they realized they could cut a man open and he would heal. And they could do some kind of surgery on him. They found a whole lot of people who had cranial surgery back thousands of years ago, and others who had been worked on, and it wasn't until probably the something like the 1800s or so, when or maybe 1700s, when they realized that if you touch someone who has some kind of disease, and you go and touch a live person who is sick, and you can pass that disease on to them. It wasn't until Dr. Lister, you've heard of Listerine, when Dr. Lister recognized that and told everybody to start washing their hands, because what they would do is they would go and they would look at the cadavers in the morning, and then they do their rounds in the afternoon, and they were passing the diseases that were growing on the cadavers to the people who were in the hospital in the evenings. And so there are a lot of things from the Bible and he tells people to wash your hands, don't touch those who have issues, and so on and so forth. And these things are there for us to understand. And when Adam tells us that Eve was the mother of all living, that means that she was the one who produced every single person on the earth. In fact, all the people on the earth come from Adam and Eve. We all have a common ancestor. Now, we may have different things like our DNA, our blood types and stuff like that. And of course, your DNA is unique to you. But all the people on the earth were from Adam and Eve. They must have had a great sell on these hats. I thought that was kind of interesting. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
There's been somebody selling them right outside the door. But the key here is for us to understand that we are one race. We are called the human race. There isn't but one race. In other words, there isn't but one kind, and this is why Adam actually means mankind. Kind after kind. Remember what I told you about that this morning, about how to pay attention to kind after kind? If you tell somebody in the world, well, now wait a minute, there's always kind after kind. They say, oh, you're a creationist. Because the scientist world wants to say that there are groupings or there are particular styles or whatever. But when you say kind after kind, they understand you're using the Word of God as your basis of understanding. And so this is important for us to remember, no matter what we think about others, no matter what we think about people, it is the fact that they are all one, and we are all one human race. And so let's take a look at the next point here, that it's just simply hate. In John 8, Jesus goes into detail here talking about God and Satan, and he does this intentionally so that people can understand who they are, what they are. If you're going to be kind after kind, if you're going to follow God, then you're going to have to follow His way. If you're going to follow Satan, you're going to follow Satan's way. Look how he describes Satan here in verse 44. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth. There is no truth in him when he lies. He speaks his native language. He is a liar and a father of lies. So he's telling us that if you hate, if your way is to hate, then you are actually following Satan. You're not following God. If you're following God, you must love. Look here at the things that God wants us to be. Notice how much love is involved in the definition of each one. To be obedient is to do what we're asked to do. Loving, which would be here, is to act in the best interest of someone else. To be generous is to give freely. To be gentle is to act humbly. Care about them more than you care about yourself. Encouraging is to cheer someone on. To be patient is to trust that God will do what He has said. To be kind is to act with love and mercy. In other words, to be kind is to act like God, to be in His kind. And then to be thankful, to appreciate what you have, and enduring is to continue even when it's hard and you think that you're being oppressed. You still have to endure. And we have, of course, we have Satan and what he is. And when you see hatred or anger, it is always rooted in the fear. And the fear is always rooted in something being disrupted, something that you believe to be true but is now wrong. And so it's kind of interesting when we look around at people who hate and see their attitude, and they're going to push their way, or they're going to fight their way, or they're going to be their way until you succumb to who they are and what they demand. And so that is the epitome of hate. It is to force their ideology or their thought process on you. Racism is hate. It is not about a color or a nationality. It is simply hate. That's it. Now, isn't it kind of interesting that we have several different colors of people here in this world? And I tell you that with Adam and Eve, all of the possible colors that a person would be on earth, and their eye colors and skin colors, everything about that was embodied in Adam and Eve. And also, of course, within Noah and his wife and his sons and their wives, because when they carried it through, it says there was giants in the old days and there was giants afterwards. So those anomalies or those qualities were there in those people. And so it's very interesting to see how that God has designed it so that if we love, we destroy hate. But if we hate, we're only hating because we have chosen to hate and we're choosing a certain thing. Racism is not an opinion. Misogyny is not an opinion. Casteism, that's a caste where people are born into a particular caste, they can't get out of it, is not an opinion. Homophobia is not an opinion. Transphobia is not an opinion. Xenophobia is not an opinion. It's simply hatred. If you truly love the person, then you would treat them differently. You would be concerned about their soul and concerned about their peace and concerned about whether or not they are respected. So every single person out there has to understand that racism is simply hatred. Doesn't matter what for or why, it just simply is. Now, here's an interesting little subject matter. There's a horse herd over there in Asia, and it's over 10,000 horses strong. They can't be controlled. They can't be caught. It's just too many of them, and they roam around between Mongolia and China, and they just do wherever they want. And notice the different colors here in this picture. You'll see there's a black here, there's a brown up here. You can see different colors in them all, and it shows that even in were we to do any kind of natural breeding, you would have all these different colors. Now, is it true that people who have darker coloring have a tendency, have an easier time in a hotter, brighter sun area? That's true. However, the reason why is because most of the people who were light-skinned, they would have been destroyed by an overdose of vitamin D, which is sunlight. And if you're in the north and they want to be able to help make you healthy, what they'll do is they'll put you in front of a sun lamp, and you'll stand there and take in that sun rays and be able to make yourself healthier through the winter. And notice that also when we look at this group of horses, look at this: white horses and brown horses and even black horses right there beside the white ones. And yet we don't look over there and say, oh, look at all those white horses. They're not as good as the black horses or the brown horses. We just want a horse so we can ride it. We may be particular about it because it has a particular gait or whatever. And there's even that dapple gray one right there. But in the natural order, there would have been several different colors naturally. And I was listening to this one scientist who said, if Adam and Eve had been middle brown, or in other words, they had brown, you have two parts of your chromosome come together, and it creates who you are, and so part of it may be this, part of it may be that. So if you were middle brown, and if Adam had been middle brown, Eve had been middle brown, they could have had 16 children, and every one of them different from white to black. Because it was in their DNA and their genes when God created them that way. And for us to look at a human then and consider that they are evil or bad or whatever because of their particular color is to involve hate. Here's what happened. Back in the 1500s, there was what was called the Age of Enlightenment. You've heard of this? The Age of Enlightenment. And France was right at the core of that. You remember, France killed off all the aristocrats and what they did was they took people whom they thought were very intelligent and they put them in control of things like the schools or the government or something like that. If you were real intelligent, they would want you to be in control of that. And they looked around the world, and you can imagine them standing in Paris with all these beautiful artwork and beautiful buildings and spires on the church buildings and so on, and they would look around the world and they would say, "What's that?" And they would look down there into Africa, and they would see they had mud huts made with sticks and stuff like that, and the guys are out hunting animals with a stick, not even with a bow and arrow, but with a stick. They would run them down. There was a guy, I went over to his house and I was doing some upholstery for him, and he had a very unusual animal on the wall. Part of it on the wall. And I asked him about it, and he said he was very fortunate to have that. He had been indoctrinated into this tribe, and this tribe is the only tribe that has the right to hunt that particular animal. And so he said what they did was they would start out in the morning and they would find an animal and they would split up into groups, and one group would run after this animal for a few hours, and they would chase him in the direction of the next group, and the next group would run after him until finally the animal was so tired he would fall over and they'd come up and kill him. Okay? And so this is the way they did it. And you would say to yourself, my goodness, that's awful primitive, isn't it? Because over in Europe at that time, they're building weapons where they can shoot, they can shoot guns with bullets in them, and they have made them better and better and better until we have what we have today. And they're capable of hunting from afar, from afar off, where you can shoot an animal that's on another hill, and the animal doesn't even know you're there. Or way up high, like a mountain sheep. And so they can, and yet man decided that people with darker skin were of lesser intelligence and had not, evolved as high as they had with their lighter skin. And we see countries like Korea, and if you ever notice Koreans, the women are wearing gloves. And they are doing that on purpose because they're wanting to make sure that they don't tan. Because the lighter your skin in Korea, the more sought after you are as a woman. And even in our society here, I had a good friend of mine who had come to counseling, and I had helped her and her family out greatly, and she said she was always pushed away because she didn't have she was a black lady, and she didn't have light black skin. She had a very dark skin, And so they even had that thinking going on, even in their society. And she came to me a few years later and said, I'm worried about my son because he's dating, and he's dating only white girls. And I said, what is the problem? And she said, well, I would think that he would want a girl that would be his same color. And I said, well, maybe what he likes about them he can't find with a woman that's in his own color. And she said, well, what would that be? And I said, well, you think about it and you come tell me. And she did. She came back and she said, well, she's very quiet. I said, yes, yes, she is. And so this consideration of racism is in reality a choice that each person has made, and it's taught to others. It's taught to those who are coming up, the children. And my father said he had a real problem with it because he was taught that way, and he knew better according to the Bible, and he fought with this greatly. And one day I was sitting there in a kiddie corral. Now, if you guys went to a grocery store when you didn't get to sit in a kiddie corral, you were just poor. I mean, it was just a shame you didn't have that opportunity. But in the kiddie corral, they had all these cartoon books and magazines and stuff, and you could sit down on this little picnic table and watch and read through cartoon books while your mother was out shopping. And the only time she'd call you away from there was because she was getting too much for one cart and she needed you to push the other cart. And but one day I was asking her, Mother, why is it, because I went to get a drink of water and there was two water faucets side by side. I mean, there wasn't this much room between them. And one of them said white, and it was white. The top of it was white. And the other one said colored, and it wasn't. It was also white. And I said, I don't understand this. What does it mean? And she said, well, it means that people who are colored people, which is what they used to call people who are black today or whatever, could only drink from this one, and people who are white can only drink from this one. And I said, how is that right? And she said, well, let's ask God. And I said, oh, I thought, okay, what are we going to do? Pray, And she said, come around here. So we ran around to the kiddie corral, went to the back of the water faucets, the water height things, because they were right there by the kiddie corral. And she said, do you see that God brings the water in like this? And man separates it. That was a real powerful lesson for me that I'll never forget. We choose to hate someone because of their color or their nationality or what language they speak. In fact, many people will think that people who don't speak English well are dumber than people who speak English well when they know 2 or 3 languages. They just don't know all the words you know because they haven't lived only in the English-speaking world. And so the reality is, how do you increase your IQ points? You want to know? You increase your vocabulary. How do you increase your vocabulary? You can learn another language. And learn a language and when you learn those other words, you're increasing your IQ points. But we have to take responsibility for our own actions, because thinking in terms of racism is not for God, but against God, and all it is hatred towards a certain group of people. And it's usually taught, passed down from parents to children, or taught in movies or something like that. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some pretty pathetic cultures out there, But you can't hate them just because of their color, and that's all racism is hatred. You've got two choices. You can love them or you can hate them. That is your choice. Nobody else can make that choice. You have to choose what you're going to do. Well, what does God say about this then? How do we think about this? And let me tell you, God never gives us the color of a man in the Bible. Except he did tell us that Esau was reddish and that David was ruddy. And so they had a reddish tint to them. But that doesn't mean we know what color they were. We don't know what color Christ was. People who have pictures up of Christ, they'll usually have some kind of European picture, even curls to the hair and stuff like that. Whereas we have no idea what he looked like. But if you go over to a black person's house, all the pictures in there of Christ or the apostles or somebody like that are all black. And they'll say they're the original Jews. I've heard that they're the original Jews. Well, let me tell you something. We have no idea what their color was. All we know is that they were a human of the human race. In fact, in the Song of Solomon, we see a scripture in there where it says, the woman says, please forgive me, I am having to work in the sun and I'm so dark. So we have no idea what their color was. Many people will tell you that the man of Cyrene who took up Jesus' cross and carried it was a black guy. They'll show you that in pictures, but we don't have that in information. We're not told what color Adam and Eve were. We're not told what color Noah was. We're not told what color Moses was, or Abraham, or anybody in the Bible. You know why? Because it doesn't matter. It is of no importance. You're either going to love or you're going to hate because of your own choice, not because of what color they are. And here's the fascinating thing. Can you even choose your own color? I heard the other day that there's a back peel. You take this little black liquid, well, it's in a gel, but it has liquid inside. You take these peels for back pain, that you get a nice, deep tan. And I thought, well, wouldn't that be nice? It'd be nice because then I wouldn't sunburn on my head, you know, when I'm out there mowing or something like that. But the reality is, we are what we are. Did we choose this? No. Did we choose what sex we are? No. Did we even choose to be born? No. All of a sudden one day, there we are, screaming our heads off. And we're in the world and we're trying to figure out what to do. And your mother is standing there saying something to you and you don't even understand what she's saying. So we live simply because we're God's, and we live only for His pleasure. That's the reality. We are created beings, created for Him. Okay, so let's take a look at the next point. To have respect for your fellow man. Now look at this. You see the semicolon there? See that semicolon? That means we're going to read verse 1, then we're going to skip down to 16 and 17. Okay? That's in 1 Peter. Oh, I gotta go find it. Sorry. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. Let's read it. Therefore, rid yourself of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, evil, and slander of every kind. Okay, let's go over to 16. Live as free men, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as servants of God. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the brotherhood of believers. fear God, honor the king. Did you hear what he said? Did he say anything about color? No. What did he say? He said, rid yourself of evil actions. What's an evil action? Well, hatred is. Hatred towards men. Here's where your mind looks when you're on racism. You remember how they used to show the egg? And they would say, this is your brain on drugs. Okay, here's your mind on racism. It is dirty and filthy, and you must clean it up. I know you were looking for the after. It didn't have an after. So I'll give you an after. And doesn't it look nice now? This is how your mind ought to look, in order. If you are hating people, I don't care whether it's racism or whether it's something else, if you're hating someone for what they did to you, your mind is out of order. And I don't mean it's not working anymore. I mean it is not working right before God. Can you imagine the pain that people go through who are full of racism and hate people so greatly that they want them dead? It's got to be destroying their minds. And God tells us what we have to do is renew our minds. Put it back in order. Rid yourselves of the evil actions towards man. This means you actually have to work hard. Can you imagine what it would be like to clean that house up to this right here? There'd have to be a lot of work involved and money as well. You'd have to get rid of all the trash, and you would have to buy the solutions to clean it and spray it and buy the tools to be able to keep it clean and so on. You have to keep your mind in order every single day. This is the way your mind ought to look. And notice, what does the floor show? Not the trash anymore. What does it show? It shows the sunlight coming in the window. So your clean life shines the sun's light that comes in your window, comes in, and you can't help but put it out the same way. And then second, we see that you have to live as a free man. You have to remember, you were in prison. You were at the point where you were lost and condemned eternally. That's what chapter 3, verse 20 is talking about when it says that Jesus preached to those who were in prison, talking about under Noah. Noah preached for 100 years to people who were following the laws and the ideas and the concepts of man. And yet all of their thinking was wicked continually. They never had a good thought. And so what do we see? When Moses preached to them, then Jesus was there preaching to them about the truth of how to change their minds. Yet none of them did, except Noah's wife and his 3 children and their wives. Which shows good leadership, and he raised his children well. But you know what we don't know? Did he have daughters? We have no idea. And we know he had cousins and nephews and uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters. But they didn't make it on the ark because their mind was out of order. It was like that first picture, all cluttered with other ideas of evolution. There is no God, or maybe the God that they think there is, they have made in their mind. You know, there are people who say, well, I'm going to be baptized, but that's enough. That's enough. God doesn't demand any more of me. Well, where do you get that scripture? You don't get it from the Bible. You've made that up, or you've heard somebody say that, and so you start to believe it, and it becomes who you are. Isn't that sad? And isn't that horrible to know that they think that they're okay before God and they are not? So live as free men, live as people who have been delivered from the jail of bondage of sin. And now they're able to live as free men. But don't forget, even though you're free, you're not free to do whatever you want. Because you're still to be a servant of God. You're to be someone who serves God with your actions. Make sure your actions are right before God. Make sure you're someone who recognizes your debt has been paid and you owe Jesus Christ what he deserves, which is to be someone who is respecting their fellow man. Their color doesn't matter. You know, we have a lot of great black men in our society. Clarence Thomas is one of them. What a guy, great guy. Now, he made some mistakes, yeah. Martin Luther King, no. Martin Luther King was a really, truly quite a horrible man. And as you go throughout and look at his life, you can see how sad it was and how far off he was. But the facts don't matter if you're going to believe a lie. Thomas Sorrells and Michael Steele and just several really good black men who have helped us in understanding what's right and what's wrong. And we have no idea about the authors of the Bible, what color they were. And let me tell you something, it doesn't even matter. But here's what you do. If you're a person of color and you hate the fact that people won't stop in a taxi cab and pick you up, why don't you change who you are so that people around you will change and the stigma on those who are black won't be that they won't be picked up by the cab driver? Look how simple that is. All it has to do is start with you. Whether you're, no matter what color you are, it just starts with you. And you pass it on to others. And we're only a generation away from losing our freedom here in America. And sometimes it seems like it's more rapid than that. Rapider, I don't think is a word. More rapid than that. So live as free men, but don't forget you're a servant of God because you have a price. You have something you have been bought, and you live only to serve Him. And then lastly, you're to show respect to all, no matter who they are, even people you don't like. Have you ever had someone walk away from you and hurt you because they don't want to talk to you? They're tired of you. Or maybe you're not high enough on their scale, wherever their scale is, whether it be with intelligence or whether it be with money. Or maybe they talk down to you because they think that you're just too dumb to be able to understand what they're saying. Your job is to show respect to all people. Respecting someone indicates the quality of your personality, not them. I tell you what, if you want a real good dose of that, go and work with the special needs kids. And work with them and deal with them. And it's very tough sometimes to be able to deal with special needs kids. We used to have a little group come over I think it was every Tuesday night. And they would come over to the house and we'd do some games and have a meal and stuff like that, you know. And finally we decided to take them out and go places. And so I made T-shirts for them, and it had a big circle in the middle with a star on it, and says special forces around the circle, you know. And we would go like to theaters, and they would take them up and show them how the theaters are shown, and they got to look through the window and see all the people sitting down there in the, you know, in the auditorium. Or we go to milking, go out and see how they milk cows and stuff like that. Let me tell you, it's hard to deal with them. You have to be in control of yourself. Respecting someone indicates the quality of your personality. And everything you do must glorify God. May God be glorified in all of your actions, because your actions are appropriate before your Father. You're not doing evil things. You're not thinking evil ways. You're not doing that kind of stuff, because it isn't who you are. The only way you can do that is if you have evil within you. The only way you can hate someone is if you're evil and you turn around and act evil because that's who you are. If you're not right with God, if you need some help, or you need some prayer, or maybe you need some study, here we are. And you can come forward as we stand and we sing this song together.